CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
Who's in the NFL here? You? You? How about you, Tim? You, Tim.
Welcome to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. The Bills broke St. John Fisher University training camp today. They have their first preseason game, their only home preseason game, Saturday at 1 p.m. against the New York Giants at Highmark Stadium. That will be Kids Day. It's also Erie County Fair, so if you're going to the game, I don't know, make sure you leave your home at 6:30 in the morning to get there on time. I'm not looking forward to the early start on Saturday with the Erie County Fair going on. It's always a drag, traffic and the whole thing. Because it's the only preseason game, Jonah, and it is Kids Day, do you think, what kind of crowd do you think we get for the opener?
I think it'll be a sizable crowd, but it won't be a big tailgate. So might change the timing of traffic. Earlier in the morning might not be as many people out there as a normal game would get. You also aren't going to have the 10 to 15,000 people going to a game that don't have tickets. So the overall volume of cars and people in Orchard Park will be a little less, but I think seats in the stadium will be pretty full, a lot of kids, and it'll be a pretty big crowd, especially being the only preseason game.
Yeah, no, I'm not looking forward to it, especially when there are so many injuries. James Cook's not going to play. Josh Allen's not going to play. We're going to learn some things about some players. Some starters are going to be out there. And, but there just aren't a lot of spots or starting jobs open on this roster. I think the thing I'm most looking forward to, Jonah, is the kicking game. Tyler Bass has been hurt. He's had the pelvic injury, and Reed Ferguson also is having a problem with his wrist. And what's going to happen? Ray Davis, the second-year running back, is listed on the depth chart as the backup kicker for this game. So from an amusement standpoint, I think that could be pretty cool. They're going to have to kick. Not only do you need to kick, well, I mean, they don't have to kick extra points, I guess. They can go for it on fourth down and always go for two, but you have to kick off. And you also want your players to get those reps. The people who are going to be on the kickoff unit and the field goal unit, they need some live reps. They want to go up against a unit that's trying to block. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how Sean McDermott handles that. Beyond that, I don't know how much interest there really will be or how much we'll learn. Somebody is going to probably have a big game. Somebody who's not going to make the roster is going to catch the fans' eye, which happens every year. And he'll become the darling of the rest of the preseason, somebody that folks will start banging the drum for. So he's got to make the roster. Andy Isabella's got to make the roster. Who was the British rugby player?
Christian Wade.
Christian Wade's just got to make the roster. We got to find a room for this guy. So yeah, a couple of those dudes will emerge. But what are you looking at, Jonah, for Saturday's game?
I kind of agree. I think the Bills have about 50 to 52 roster spots almost locked up and almost every starting position decided. And there isn't going to be a lot that players can do in these preseason games to change the depth chart and, you know, whether they're going to make the team or be practice squad type players or whatnot. But injuries, and the Bills have a lot of banged up players. They don't have too many players that are long-term injuries that aren't going to be available at the start of the season or might be put on that short-term IR. It doesn't seem that way right now. But a couple names, I think Tyrell Shavers was a bit of a star in last year's training camp and also had his moments in this year's camp after they had some injuries at wide receiver. I think there's an opportunity for him to maybe claim that last roster spot as the sixth receiver. I think he's better than the other receivers that he's competing with, and he's competing with defensive backs and linebackers, maybe just for that last spot. He isn't a special teams contributor, which might hurt him. I think in a way, we're going to be watching the 11 on 11 offense and defense series to see who looks good. And the Bills are probably watching the special teams and, as you mentioned, the kicking game to see who should claim that last roster spot or two, because that's usually how you make the team. I think the intriguing thing, a summer-long storyline that goes into the preseason, is some of the Bills' draft picks from last year that haven't really solidified their roles yet. Eddie Ulofoshio, Javon Solomon, probably on the team, but maybe not. And if you start doing math and looking at things, you wonder if they make the team. I think there's a competition maybe between Jamarcus Ingram and Dane Jackson for that last defensive back spot. Dane Jackson is ahead of Jamarcus Ingram on the depth chart right now. We'll see who performs better in preseason games. And then I think a multi-week preseason storyline perhaps is backup quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky and Mike White. Mitchell Trubisky's getting the start here. Will the Bills decide to start Mike White in game 2? Will they start Josh Allen? We don't know if Josh Allen's going to play in this preseason. The person who starts game 3 is probably not the backup quarterback. That's a game where not just starters sit out, but a lot of the key backups sit out. So see which quarterback looks better this game, and if that influences who gets more opportunity with the starters in the second week of the preseason.
Yeah, I just want to make a note. I know that I was riffing there about the kicking game. Jake Camarda has done a lot of kickoffs in the NFL. He's not just a punter. So he could handle the kickoff duties.
But he's not on the team anymore unless they've signed him in the past hour. Brad Robbins is the punter. He probably will do the kickoffs.
Thank you, Tim.
Oh, Brad Robbins has not done any kickoffs. I'm you know what? You're right. I'm at a loss.
Thank you, Tim.
They could. The Bills are going to probably sign a place kicker. They worked out a couple yesterday for this game. Ray Davis, Sean McDermott kind of mentioned that he might get an opportunity to kick an extra point or two and continue to work on being the emergency kicker, but I don't think they're going to ask him to do the bulk of the kicking. So they probably are going to sign a place kicker here tomorrow, and I would assume whoever that is will kick off. And, it's not just about the field goals and the extra points, as you mentioned. The Bills need to evaluate their kick coverage, especially with the rule changes and things like that, and they need somebody who can kick off effectively with the right depth and distance so that they can run down and cover the kicks properly. Or maybe it'll be an open tryout for the kickoffs. Maybe Ray Davis, who I saw him kick some field goals at the open practice last week, and he made a few and looked adept at it it looked like a good high school kicker, I thought, but I don't know if he has the leg to kick 60-yard kickoffs with the right height and, what they need out of that in this preseason game.
I feel like a donkey that I thought Camarda was still on the team. He's been gone for 2 weeks.
Thank you, Tim.
I am not as into it as Joe Biscaglia with his punter palooza, obviously. I feel shame.
I think I could have made the same mistake. I'm pretty aware of Brad Robbins because I have a friend named Brad Robbins, and his father was actually my high school basketball coach and a gym teacher. And Brad Robbins, that I know, is also the bass player in the Believers band. So there'll be 2 Brad Robbins performing at Highmark Stadium on Saturday, one on the outside pregame and one on the field during the game.
Well, Brad Robbins, I was looking up both of their stats. Brad Robbins has not kicked off in an NFL game, but you know how these punters are. You need to kind of learn a little bit of everything. You're the emergency kicker if you're the punter, and you're the emergency punter if you're the kicker. I don't know. We've spent way too much time talking about this because I'm fascinated about something I only know a little bit about, apparently.
It's a good week 1 of the preseason storyline.
the Bills are just riddled with injuries all over the place. Nothing super serious. Of course, there was the scare with Max Hairston that went from looking like torn ACL, that non-contact injury in a pass rushing drill, in which cornerback Christian Benford was praying over Max Hairston, to learning that it was just a sprained LCL, a lateral collateral ligament. Still going to keep him out for a few weeks. We talked about it last week on the podcast, and how it is similar to Cole Bishop last year, a rookie coming in from the defensive backfield who is ready to play on opening day, but missed too much preparation time, practice time to learn the system, to learn what Sean McDermott wants out of his defensive backs, what Bobby Babich wants to deploy, that even though the injury is not season ending, it is still significant enough to really substantially impact a rookie season. And now Cole Bishop still struggling to get back onto the field. And I'm sure the Bills are frustrated with that, that this is now only 2 training camps in the NFL for Cole Bishop, and both of them have been beset by injuries. But Curtis Samuels had trouble getting on the field. Of course, Khalil Shakir week to week with the high ankle sprain. That's of note. However, Khalil Shakir has been in the NFL long enough and catching passes from Josh Allen long enough, and hearing Joe Brady's voice long enough that he'll be ready to go once his ankle is ready to go. He doesn't need to pick up a system. He doesn't need to learn the language, any of that type of thing. So even though that's a tough one and you want him out there, I think that Khalil Shakir's injury has been good news, because it could have been much worse. The one injury, I think really the most significant injury we've had so far, is the most unexpected injury of training camp. And it has led to that player being released, and it's linebacker Balen Spector, who came up limping in Tuesday's practice, I think it was. I think that, and then he was cut the next day. And I think that the Bills just kind of ran out of patience, not only patience with Balen Spector, who's constantly hurt, but they have so many other injuries. They can't just afford to keep people around until they're healthy enough. Shaq Thompson, who's a veteran that they want, and they think that with his leadership and his story, and he's, goes back to the Carolina days, and the how much both Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are drawn to Shaq Thompson and the things that he can do with him on the sidelines. And then Balen Spector could have had a chance to step up and maybe get some reps there, and then again ends up hurt. So I think Balen Spector, to me, is the most notable injury, because I think it's the end of a career. And he's been there, like, just below the surface now for a few years, as somebody who, thinking back, that playoff game that they had to bring AJ Klein out of retirement to play. Balen Spector was supposed to be that guy to step up and, all right, let's go, fill in for Matt Milano or wherever needed, and just never worked out. He was always hurt. Mm-hmm. Anything with the injury, before we get to James Cook and his situation, anything more with the injury situation with the Bills, other than the fact that there is such a high volume of them?
Yeah, I think it was 12 players that didn't practice today. That includes James Cook, who's not injured, and a couple players, Spencer Brown and Terrell Bernard, who have returned to practice, but I don't think are going to play in the preseason game because they haven't practiced a lot, or they're still working their way back to full health. On top of Josh Allen, I think you'll see a lot of key players not playing, and other key players out of that game pretty quickly. As far as Balen Spector, I think it shouldn't be lost too that he lost his spot and his role on the team last year to Joe Andreessen, who, if he's not a better player, might be a better special teams player and a better fit for the roster spot, and has been available. I don't think Joe
Balen Spector also is a 7th round draft pick, so there's not a ton invested, but I think that's why the Bills really didn't need him, but wanted him to work out. He's on a really inexpensive rookie contract, and if they could get quality time out of Balen Spector, a player that they really liked, obviously they kept him around for this would have been his 4th season, that through all the injuries, they kept him around. They invested a lot in him. But But yeah, you're right. And Joe Andreessen has had a good camp. He has had a couple of nice hits. He's made a few good plays. And I know that, Joe Biscaglia and his coverage of training camp, he's really highlighted Andreessen as a player who might be looking to take that next step to be more than just a guy who made the team simply because of special teams, but as a guy who might be evolving or maturing into a linebacker that can see spot duty.
And through his rookie season and off-season OTAs, mini camps, and into this training camp, I can't recall a day that he's missed practice with an injury. I mean, maybe it was happened, but I can't think of it happening. And I think the Bills value that availability is an ability, is a skill. And, maybe that's, something to praise Pro Forma Sports and John Opfer, where Joe Andreessen trained before the draft and trains in the offseason. They've gotten his body in a position where he's handled the rigors of the NFL. He's not a big linebacker, and a local athlete that's been able to establish his NFL career and remain healthy and productive and performing to the best of his abilities.
I just Googled just to see what comes up. I just Googled Joe Andreessen and injury report, and you would think that something would come up because the NFL puts out his, the injury report so many times a week, and they post it on their own website.
But if you've never been hurt, you wouldn't have
Right.
any
That's what I'm
data
saying.
on
It doesn't look like he's ever been on the injury report. Now, if we're missing it, that's you doing it off the top of your head and me Googling it.
I'm pretty sure he was fully healthy his year at UB too. I don't know about his career at Bryant, if he had any injuries there, but I don't think he had any while he was playing in Buffalo.
How about this? Because we, again, we know that the dubious nature of Chat GPT. I'm going to ask Chat GPT if Joe Andreessen has ever been on an NFL injury report.
I think we're jinxing Joe Andreessen here. I think we're talking about this so much that something could happen in the future.
It's hard for me to type when my computer's up on a little platform here for podcasting, so it makes it. I couldn't find any record indicating that Joe Andreessen has ever appeared on an NFL injury report. A search summary of his injury status on Fox Sports shows no data available. Similarly, his publicly reported injury history is tied only to his college days, such as a left ankle injury and a torn PCL during his time at Bryant University, but nothing from his NFL career.
What do we think about the fact that I just said all of that off the top of my head with no research, and ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, is just catching up to where I am naturally?
Chat GPT.
Yeah.
What's your middle initial?
So Chat JMB.
Yeah, Chat JMB. I like it. I mean, if you really had said something like, I think he was hurt at Bryant, that would have really been stunning.
Yeah, I mean, if I had known his Bryant injury history, I wish I could tell you. I don't wish, but it would be if I knew. He missed that Lancaster Depew game as a sophomore, with an ankle sprain.
Well, yeah, so it's looking pretty good for Joe Andreessen so far here in camp. So yeah, we just did put the voodoo spell on. We just whammy weenied him. James Cook. I have thoughts on it, Jonah. I'll just ask yours. His situation, he's been 4 straight practices in which he has not been on the field. Sean McDermott said today that he has been present and in the meetings. And then Sean McDermott also said he expected him on the field today, although they think that's a generic thing that a coach says as like a motivator. I expect all my players to be out there, kind of a fatherly tone that it's his way of expressing disappointment while speaking in very general terms in the team construct. So there was some optimism that the hold in was going to be over today when Sean McDermott said he expected James Cook to be on the practice field, but then we saw no James Cook. So James Cook will not be playing on Saturday, even had he been in practice. That probably wouldn't have anyway. But where do you think things stand with James Cook and the Bills? And I'm not going to ask you from a contract standpoint. because we don't know all about that. But just in terms of, has this reached distraction level? Is this a problem?
Uh, I don't know if it's a major problem. I do think it's something. I think when we talked about this after James Cook attended mandatory minicamp, or it might have even, yeah, it was when that happened, and there was a belief before, or a prevailing thought before James Cook showed up for the mini camps, that this was a problem, that he was holding out and he might want to trade, and that the Bills wouldn't be able to bring James Cook back into the fold this year. And then there was a belief when he did show up for the mandatory mini camp that it was over with. And I think we both cautioned that it's neither one. It's not a major issue that James Cook missed the voluntary OTAs, and it's not a dead issue just because he showed up for the mandatory minicamp and said he likes his money. I mean, I think that's a strong indicator that he's not going to hold out into the regular season when he'd incur bigger fines or forfeit game checks, that eventually he will report to play. And James Cook needs to play this season and play well in order to eventually get the contract that he seeks. I think it's intriguing that James Cook seems to be a little bit over, not over the contract issues, but over the staying away from the team and making his point and protesting. He was at camp on the first day and practicing, and the things he said, it sounded like, he was ready to work now, ready to play football, and let the contract stuff take care of itself. I think we got to see what we might learn on this second episode of Hard Knocks, because I was there last Sunday, I think it was, which was the first practice that James Cook did not participate in. He wore a very eye-catching white sweatsuit in a
Probably
very
not
warm day.
coincidental. He went so
Yeah,
the
well,
cameras could find him.
yeah, and it was he wore a white winter hat on a very warm day with his own branded logo on it. It did seem like a television appearance. And in the 3 days since, he's been there, but he hasn't been prominent at practice. He wasn't walking off the field and had the ability for reporters to ask him questions and say what he said about business. So I would assume that's going to be a big storyline or a big part of this second episode of Hard Knocks. And I do wonder if it was decided, let's do this hold in when the HBO cameras are here, and get the most media exposure out of it. Some of the reporting that John Warrow did in the Associated Press yesterday, and something that we've seen, that maybe James Cook isn't seeking $15 million a year like we thought he was, that him and his agent might be willing to take a bit less than that. And the Bills and James Cook are still not in agreement on the number, even if you presume that maybe James Cook would sign for $11 million like Kieran Williams did with the Rams. I think that's more interesting if that's the case, that if James Cook is willing to take $11 million a year, and that's still more than the Bills want to pay a running back. I don't think that's something that we didn't already recognize about Brandon Beane at the Bills and how they value that position, but it does go a bit against some of the things that Brandon Beane has said. He hasn't said that we're just not paying a running back, we're not paying James Cook anything. He said that they're, far apart, not far apart, but they're apart on the money. And I think without saying it, Brandon Beane has kind of hinted that, that $15 million number that we've heard is what James Cook wants, and that's too much. But if it's 11 or 12 million, is that still too much for the Bills?
Yeah, it's a question we don't know the answer to. It reminded of the owners' meetings back in March, when Brandon Beane, whether it was a negotiation tactic or he was being totally transparent and brutally honest, when he essentially said, well, we'll worry about this after the season. And it was kind of it was a pretty notable thing for him to say, because there's still months to go before the regular season was going to start. And he was saying to the world that we are done negotiating with James Cook, and his agents and I are not close enough that we would keep working on it, that we're just going to worry about this after the season. And it's interesting. I do see some of it on social media. I may end up writing about it in a column, but I do think it's interesting that there are some fans out there that think, yeah, James Cook, either just dump him, trade him, or he's got to come back tomorrow or very soon, because he has zero leverage, because he's under contract. really, I think is where that comes from. He's under contract, a rookie deal. He does have leverage. He has heavy duty leverage. In fact, he's using it right now. And he's not practicing. The Bills want him to practice, and he's not practicing. He is not making the team is not better right now than it is with James Cook happy and on the field. And he does have leverage in what might he do next. Who's to say he doesn't show up for week 1 or week 2 or week 3? He doesn't need to show up until, I don't know if it's week 11 or 11 games, but he can go that long without being with the team and then show up and say, all right, guys, I'm ready to play. And he gets credit for a contract year served and towards free agency. And then he can be a free agent or franchise tagged after the year. So the mystery of what he might do also has some influence. He has leverage.
Yes.
Players always have leverage.
But I don't think, maybe you think, I don't think he's going to forfeit his game checks to miss too many games or more than one. I don't think any. And if he doesn't have a good season, if he only plays the final 6 or 7 games and the Bills have already established Ray Davis and Ty Johnson as their main running backs, and he comes in midseason and the Bills aren't using him that much, I don't think he's going to be able to go to free agency next year and get anywhere close to the deal he wants. He has to have a significant season and still be one of the top, regarded as one of the top 10 to 12 running backs in the league to get the money he wants. He's going to forfeit the money he thinks he's going to get down the line by holding out now.
Maybe. And the reason I push back on that even a little bit is I think you're right, Jonah. I do think you're right. However, it only takes one team to be interested in you, and it only takes one team to see 16 touchdowns last year and be pretty easy to imagine, even if he doesn't produce this year on, let's say, we're carrying out this theory that there's a chance he doesn't play and that could backfire on him. But what about this? Less mileage, a guy who doesn't have much mileage on his body already, still with a pretty unbattered frame and still has that ability. And you look at it as an NFL scout or a general manager or an owner and say, this guy scored 16 touchdowns 2 years ago. He didn't absorb much wear and tear in 2025. Yes, he didn't produce because of circumstance. There's all kinds of ways for his agent and his representation to couch his value to a team and say he was unhappy. And yes, he wasn't, the greatest teammate with the Buffalo Bills because he was upset, but you signed him to this money and you don't have to worry about him. Everything you ever heard about James Cook is that he's a great teammate who works hard and takes care of himself. And this was just, to quote the man himself, business. So yeah, I think you're right. For practical purpose, you want general managers are going to want to see 2 years of production, but he can still point to 2024, even if he doesn't do much action wise in 2025, as something that he could bank on.
And even if he's trying to prove his value to the Bills, a lot of that is showing that he can pass block and be a 3-down running back. I don't know if the Bills are going to give him too many of those opportunities with the guys that they have and the way they split the snaps in the past. But, if you think it's close or they think they can prove to the Bills that he is worth $12 million a year, he needs to be on the field and show that he can do what he's done already and do a little bit more.
The value to James Cook, I think, yes, he's exercising his leverage by holding in, and he is flexing that muscle a little bit. I used it in my column after one day. I said his flexing his muscle or his leverage is more like a muscle twitch, when you're holding in and he's probably going to be back. But who really needs James Cook to create some interest or some drama is Hard Knocks. Because that first episode, I get it. And I know that Bills fans, it pandered to it wasn't pandering to Bills fans. What they were doing as an episode, and I wrote about it at The Athletic, what they were doing for the episode is they are setting the scene for the country. even casual football fans who don't know who Dawson Knox is or who Deion Dawkins is or Christian Benford or Matt Milano or Terrell Bernard or, fill in the blanks. Josh Allen is the only marquee name on this roster, really, from the casual football fan standpoint, where everybody. There aren't a lot of fantasy football go-to people on this roster. And James Cook, who probably if he walked into a bar in Los Angeles, not one person would recognize him as James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. So NFL Films and HBO need and Liev Schreiber, they need to introduce the world to the Buffalo Bills. So there were a lot of things that we all knew about, with the exception of maybe AJ Epinesa hunting boa constrictors with his bare hands and the help of a dog. Everything on there we knew. As people who cover the Bills, or I'm talking about the fans watching it. I found it, with the exception of seeing the NFL Films cinematic slow motion of Josh Allen dropping passes, right into a receiver's hands. I mean, I know that that's porn for a lot of Bills fans, and there were some really over the top responses, I thought, to just seeing your Bills in this platform. And I get it. That's cool, but it was a pretty boring first episode. There was really nothing there to learn. Am I missing? Am I being too much
I
of a
agree,
cynic?
but
What did you?
I think, as you said before, I think that might have been a little bit by design. I don't watch Hard Knocks every year, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's similar structures to how they organize the episodes. In the first episode is a lot of introduction and setting the scene and not much storyline advancement. I mean, the dramatic arc of a 5-episode series, maybe you're going to get that in the final scene of the first episode for a cliffhanger, but you usually don't get the major crux of a story in the drama in the first hour of a 5-hour movie. If we're saying this is what it comes on later,
Right,
towards the end, and it builds. I mean, I think if episode 2 is the same, that would be curious. I think you kind of get into the some of the more dramatic situations going on with the Bills. There was no mention of Max Hairston in the lawsuit that he's facing, and the comments he made about that, and the comments Brandon Beane made about that on day one. That was
and there might not be.
There might not be, but I mean, I'm just thinking of other potential drama points that could have been used in the first episode that weren't. I mean, what else could there have been? Could they got into some stuff in the past with Diggs and Von Miller and who's not here anymore?
Damar Hamlin.
Damar Hamlin. I think that might.
Kim Pagula.
And Kim Pagula. I think a lot of those things still could come up later, and especially with Kim Pagula, I think was at Monday's practice, and
She's
Damar
been at a few of the
Hamlin.
practices.
Yeah, but I mean, she was out of the truck and taking pictures.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there. I just saw the photos on Monday. And I think Damar Hamlin did an event in Rochester related to cardiac health, cardiology, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was filmed and worked into a storyline. There might be a whole episode kind of devoted to the past, present, and the future of Damar Hamlin, and some of the drama with Damar Hamlin that some maybe thought could happen, of whether his roster spot was in jeopardy or he was still proving his worth to the team and hanging on to his spot in the NFL. I think is dissipated with, he's performed pretty well. I think he's beat out Derek Forrest for that third safety spot. And I think with the injuries, he's pushing to be a starter again, and still, he actually is a returning starter, even though he wasn't starting at the very start of training camp.
Yeah, I think that James Cook is going to be the big drama, obviously, heading into a season or the second episode. Things stopped at the scrimmage last Friday. So and I didn't realize this, but when James Cook did not practice that Sunday, I thought that might make the episode because there were still 48 hours to air, but they had already done too much of the production and they were just going to save it for episode 2. But yeah, it was a lot of window dressing. It was a lot of, it was just happy horse shit. it's which is fine, but I just found it boring. It's also funny, the things that listening to, people talk about the show. I guess, like I say, maybe I'm just a stick in the mud on some of it, but the things that people were saying were hilarious. Oh my God, that was just so hilarious when was it Taron Johnson said that about the toilet paper, and I'm like, really? Was it hilarious? Why? Because you're the guy on your football team just made a comment about the toilet that was hilarious. I mean, I don't know.
The only
It's
people
like
that
everybody
have,
gets so
well,
enraptured by the fact that your team is relevant. But and I understand it, especially when you went 17 years of total irrelevancy, and now the Bills are getting their glow up treatment and that the world is watching this. It's not just Bills Embedded or those shows that the Bills put out on MSG during their broadcast, their radio show, or something that they put on their website. This is actually and as a Bills fan, as you're watching it, everybody is seeing our guys, and I think that is intoxicating.
yeah. Well, glad we didn't plan on doing a live reaction podcast like some other Bills podcasters did, because I think the episode didn't leave, didn't provide much fodder for that. I thought about writing like a 4 things we learned from Hard Knocks. I thought you'd get a lot of behind the scenes comments and little information on injuries or things like that didn't come out in the first week. It was a whole week's worth of training camp practices that were worked into that episode. And that would have been a real force. Other than the AJ Epinesa catching the snakes with his bare hands, I didn't learn very much. I learned that more players than I thought ride around on scooters. I've seen plenty of the players riding around on scooters, but you only usually see them one at a time. And that montage kind of showed that a lot of the teams, Tre'Davious White running hill sprints on campus. I'd never seen that before with my own eyes. So that was a revelation. The Trey Day Sunday. I went to Pittsford Dairy last night. That's on the menu now, and you can get there for $12.95.
Pittsford Dairy, like that's a go-to place. People know that, especially if you're somebody who attends Bills training camp, or follows social media, that's the place to go spot some Bills, get an autograph, get a picture taken during training camp. That's one of the go-to places. It'll be interesting to see if they send the cameras into the Pittsford pub. That would also be a good place for content. Although it's too late for that. They broke camp today, so I hope they would have need to have done it over the past 2 weeks.
I'll tell them some places Saturday night where they can spot some players after midnight if the camera crews are working.
Yeah, I don't think they allow cameras in there though, Jonah.
Well, it's sign a release. I have something I wanted to bring up real quick.
Yeah.
Back to our preseason discussion. Curious in your thoughts on this. I don't have an opinion either way, but it's something I wonder about. So Josh Allen's not playing in this first preseason game. It's the only home preseason game. Josh Allen was held out for a lot of for much of the blue and red event, and especially the 11-on-11 stuff. By the way, I don't like calling it a scrimmage. It's not a scrimmage. They don't scrimmage. The official name isn't a scrimmage, but everybody does call it a scrimmage because it has some scrimmage vibes, but there's no more scrimmaging than what goes on in any other practice, and probably a little less 11-on-11 than we're used to seeing in
No live
a lot of
tackling.
practices. Yeah. And no scorekeeping. There's no competitive. It's just not a scrimmage. It's not, I'm going to go to UB 2 or 3 times. They have 3 of them this summer, and they're going to have
I don't think you need to
actual
keep scoring a
scrimmages.
scrimmage.
Well, no, but I do think you have to have game-like conditions and situations with the down and the distance and things like that. Maybe we're debating semantics here, but the Bills themselves don't really call it a scrimmage, but it gets called a scrimmage a lot by the fans and the media, and HBO did in that documentary as well. Anyways, so the fans that went out there, a lot of fans that go to that stadium practice and a lot of fans that go to this Kids Day are younger fans that won't be going to regular season games, or fans that don't have the ability to purchase tickets to the regular season games, or for whatever reason won't be going. This might be their only chance to be at the stadium and see Josh Allen play. And do the Bills have any responsibility to putting the MVP quarterback out there in uniform for a token appearance or a series or two? Is it at all like the conversation with load management in the NBA? I know these games don't count. I understand the reason why NFL teams hold out their star players and their quarterbacks. But as it goes league wide, these games are on television. They're charging nearly full price, I think, for the tickets. Is there some responsibility for the star players of the league to participate a little more than they do?
In the regular season, yes. I think that the answer to that probably tends to be, or the discussion is more about the NBA, and you don't really get it in the National Hockey League. But yeah, I think if you buy a ticket to see the Lakers or the Cavaliers play and LeBron James is sitting on the bench for the whole game, that's a problem for a regular season game. Preseason, you know what you're getting. I think that's a buyer beware situation for the preseason. I know you added the kids day element to it. Would it be nice? Yes. Maybe Josh, so he signs autographs, during the game or pregame or so. I don't know but then again, and I'm going to go back and forth, it is a game that you do sell at full value. It's not a discount. But yeah, I think that there's a buyer beware aspect to preseason game. That's just the way it is. And, but baseball is also a little different. Yeah, we got 162 games where load management, the catcher, Johnny Bench would get a day off. I mean, I know I went way back with that with it's just a catcher from my youth, but these guys who do get days off, unless your name's Cal Ripken, you would occasionally go to a game and the superstar's not playing. Reggie Jackson's not in the lineup tonight or whatever. So that's a little different too because of the sheer number of games, but when it comes to the NBA and 82 games, I think that's different than the NFL preseason.
Okay. I will say this. If the Bills are holding Josh Allen out for the entire preseason because he's that important, they don't want to provide any risk for injury. Okay, that's a decision that they're making. If he plays next week, I think if he's going to play in one preseason game and it's only to get a little bit of reps with these starters and then he's going to be out, I think that should be the one home game. That's how I feel. If they're only going to play him for 10 snaps of the preseason, do it when the home fans get to see him play and not next week in Chicago.
Okay, I get that. There's also the practice against the Bears before that game that there may be some more live reps involved there that helps him get ready for the regular season. But yeah, I think my concern is, there's health conditions or health concerns about playing in the preseason, but getting the guy ready for game one on Sunday night against the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, is that enough to get ready?
One of my favorite parts of Hard Knocks, not that it was revelatory or anything, but I just thought it was interesting, was Bobby Babich having to tell Joey Bosa and remind the defense not to touch Josh Allen in practice.
Right. That's, I guess, probably standard. You just have to do it, right? Just to, I don't know, but you think know. Or maybe that's his way of saying, all right, if I say this to Joey Bosa, Hayden Harris is listening. Now, Hayden Harris isn't on the team anymore. He's since been cut. But at the time of that meeting, that's his way of, everybody listening. If Joey Bosa needs to be reminded, then I better pay attention too. I don't want to do that if I want to make this team.
Hayden Harris cut after getting in that little skirmish with Alec Anderson, right?
Yeah, Alec Anderson cheap shotted him, and then Harris got cut.
But we don't know why. Maybe he got a little too close to Josh Allen, or maybe he bumped somebody on the play before that caused Alec Anderson to go after
Alec
him.
Anderson was the one who got ejected from practice. Sean McDermott kicked out Alec Anderson, not the other way around. So, Jonah, the Rochester Nighthawks no longer are owned by Terry and Kim Pagula, or I should say Terry. I don't want to. I mean, the Bills still say Kim Pagula is a co-owner, but legally speaking, she's not anymore. So I'm walk that back. Terry Pagula no longer owns the Rochester Nighthawks. He sold them to the Senecas this past week. Thoughts on that?
I think it's interesting. I mean, it's a Rochester-based story with Buffalo connections, and I was covering Bill's training camp, and I haven't written about it or done much reporting about it, but I found it interesting um, because of the history of lacrosse as a sport, as a Native American sport, and the popularity in that community, and for uh, a tribe, a governing body to own a professional sports franchise. I don't know if there's anything like that in another sport
Pretty
in
cool.
North America. It's pretty neat. The Seneca Nation extends throughout Western New York and even historically somewhat into Canada, but it's a very Buffalo kind of focused geography with that. The Senecas have been a big Bandit sponsor over the years. I don't think that'll change, but it'll be kind of interesting when the Rochester team is in town and, if the Senecas are still sponsoring the Bandits, but they're owning the team that plays against them. But, they were playing games when the Pagulas owned both teams,
Right. I was
which
just
was
gonna say it's
interesting.
a little.
Yeah. But I think it's encouraging for Sabres fans specifically and Buffalo sports fans the way this played out because, uh, the Pagulas came in one time to save lacrosse in Rochester when the original Rochester Nighthawks moved, I think to Vancouver, but maybe another Canadian city, but they moved out of Rochester after being there for many years. And the Pagulas stepped up and really started an expansion franchise to preserve lacrosse in Rochester and keep a team in the league for the Bandits to play against and save that situation. I think you were the first one to report maybe about a year or so ago that they were looking to sell that Rochester team. And if you follow some of the NL media, there was some rumors and talks that they were going to be sold and moved, that Rochester was going to lose their team to Canadian cities, or I think there was a Michigan city somewhere near Detroit that was trying to get a franchise, and there were rumors that Rochester would relocate. And that wasn't the case. It took a whole year to go through this process, but the Pagulas found local owners, and they seemed committed to finding an owner that would keep the team in Rochester. And they did that. And they actually tapped into Buffalo business connections, it seems, to facilitate that. And I think that's a good sign. I mean, we talked last week about, you mentioned that your reporting has told you that the Sabres are not for sale, that Terry Pegula is not interested in selling the Sabres, even though we hear persistent chatter about that. If it got to the point where that changed, I think we see some signs that, if Terry Pegula were to sell the Sabres, he would be responsible in that transaction, selling it to a local owner that would want to keep the team in Buffalo and preserve its future. I don't think he's thinking about selling the Bills, or that the family or the ownership would ever want to sell the Bills. But if they did, or if this was a Ralph Wilson situation where the team was going to be put up for sale after Terry Pegula's death, it does seem like there's a vein of local responsibility to keep these teams in Buffalo. That's why they were purchased, one of the reasons why they were purchased in the first place. And I think that's going to extend to any potential ownership change in the future. And this is a sign that the Pegula family wants to do right by Western New York, even if they make curious management decisions and haven't gotten the Buffalo hockey team competitive as you would like, that they care about keeping these sports franchises in Western New York and not just selling to the highest bidder.
The dynamic, we don't know if the dynamic will change if Terry's not the one making the decision, though. So this is a decision that was made with Terry Pegula at the helm. And as I was discussing on the podcast last week regarding the Sabres, is that I think really where things become um, uh, dicey regarding the Pegula family retaining ownership of the Sabres would be, after Terry Pegula's death, and then do they maintain Terry's spirit in that regard, or how things are, once the things change when the patriarch or the founder is no longer around, and the heirs can do whatever they wish. Maybe it's worked into the will. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we don't know and probably will never know. But I think it's encouraging. It's more encouraging than not that Terry Pegula did this with the Rochester Nighthawks to keep them local. But who's to say what the children decide to do? The original Rochester Nighthawks moved to Halifax. They're now the Halifax Thunderbirds. And the Pagula family bought the intellectual property and rights to the Rochester Nighthawks, started them up again, as you mentioned, as a expansion franchise. So much like the Cleveland Browns maintained all the records and the history of their team when it moved to Baltimore and became the Baltimore Ravens, the Nighthawks kept all their history.
Yeah, I confused my formerly Western Conference NLL semifinalists. I knew that the former Rochester Nighthawks were one of the teams the Bandits might have played in the finals, but Halifax lost to Vancouver, and that wasn't the case.
Vancouver for this episode is your Jake Camarda.
Yep.
We each required a mulligan. Jonah, you're wearing pink. Is there something going on with the Men Wear Pink campaign? Or is this just coincidence?
You know what? There is. Thank you for asking. It's not necessarily why I'm wearing pink today. Today I'm wearing pink because I haven't changed my clothes since yesterday. And I thought I was heading out to training camp on Barbie Day yesterday, which has been an annual tradition organized by Catherine Fitzgerald from the Buffalo News, award-winning sports writer from the Buffalo
Yes.
News. And I asked her because, I wanted to get a picture with all the other reporters wearing pink and use that for my Men Wear Pink campaign. I asked her on Sunday when Barbie Day was. She told me it was Wednesday. I got my best pink shirt, ironed it up, wore it yesterday. Not too many other people wearing pink. There were a couple, but I think it was kind of random. And there was no Barbie picture, and I didn't get that bit of content. But
Now,
I
wait,
got
have you
another.
been wearing this pink shirt constantly since yesterday? Or are you like
No, no,
me
no.
where you got maybe a shirt that you wear bumming around the house and because it's too clean, it's not dirty enough to be washed yet. You maybe drape it over the hamper, you hang it back up. What was the
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I was wearing a reversible basketball jersey around the house today, and I'd walked outside. That was a bit sweaty, and I didn't want to show off my musculature too much on this podcast. So I
musculature?
grabbed the college shirt that I wore yesterday that seems somewhat clean still, and just wearing it really for the podcast. But I guess I'm wearing it to showcase, Men Wearing Pink. October's coming up. There is a Men Wear Pink fundraising event on Sunday at 3 o'clock at JJ's Casa de Pizza on Mohawk Street, and that's from 3 to 8 o'clock. I think it's $10 to get in, get you some pizza. There'll be a cash bar and raffles and basket raffles and 50-50 prizes and things like that to help start raising money for the Men Wear Pink campaign in October. I went to high school with JJ.
Oh, of JJ's Casa de Pizza?
Yeah, yep.
Were you pals?
We were friendly. She was a bit younger. Her name's Jamie Jacoby, or she's married now, so it's a different last name. But that's the J and the J in JJ's.
Usually you think of a JJ as a dude. Or
Right.
I bet you people are surprised when they learn that JJ is a woman.
And you would usually think it's JJ like a first name, but it's JJ, the initials for, Jamie Jacoby. Which is also, there was a pizza place by my house growing up named Jacoby's.
Right.
But I don't
Isn't
think
there still?
There
It's still
is
there,
a
right?
not the one that was by my house that was later turned into the original Paula's Donuts location. I think there is still a Jacoby's, but not the one that I'm familiar with, and also not the one that moved
off
over to
Englewood?
Kenmore. That's where it was. It's not there anymore, though.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Well, Jonah, anything else we want to get to?
I think we're good for this week. We can,
I think so
circle
too.
back next week, talk a little more Bills, a little UB football. I've been out there a couple times. I'll be out there more next week. And high school football is about to get started. Tuesday at the stadium, there'll be a bit of a high school football preseason media day. Check that out a little bit and get caught up on who's who in the prep football ranks.
All right. Jonah, thanks for this. Thanks to everybody out there for watching/listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.